Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of ClueCon Weekly. This week, joining us is Ryan Carroll, Senior Software Engineer at Covered My Mads for part two. Thank you for joining us, Ryan.
Thank you for having me again, Luca. I'm excited again to be here.
So am I. So last time we left off saying we'd talk more about React Native, which is an environment that I feel deserves some more interest from the community, and especially for the people like myself. I'm a platform engineer. I can build anything starting from a server going up to scaling into hundreds of instances and whatnot. But my front end skills are some HTML and JavaScript that doesn't work. That's the extent of my UI skills. So, and especially when you go into mobile, I think there's a lot that is very hard to work with, and many people take longer routes. So maybe we can start from there. What is the main? First of all, what is React Native? Is it actually related to React? Because there's things like Java and JavaScript that are completely unrelated. So let's start from there. What is React Native?
Yes, I would call it a framework around making mobile applications. And it is very similar to React Web. So you mentioned React Web a second ago. And as time goes on, they become closer and closer together. So React Web is a framework for making web applications, and React Native is a framework for making web applications. And I think that the value proposition behind React Native is how it makes building mobile apps more approachable and attainable. So, one thing that I struggled with for a long time, and I think a lot of other developers struggle with, is just how seemingly intimidating mobile app development is. It's just kind of this thing that is like, I can build a web application, just like you said, I can put some JavaScript together, some HTML, I can build these different things, but web application is just like this totally other beast that's looming out there that's kind of intimidating and scary. And I don't know if I can get into that, and how much effort and learning would it take and time to get into that. And where React Native steps in is bridging that gap and bringing that down to something where, okay, I've built web applications. Maybe I've even used a little bit of React on the web. This is something that I have seen before, or it looks very
Mhm.
similar to things that I have seen before. So let me start dipping my toes in, and then you get into it and you realize there are some complexities to it and there are some differences, but it's really that bridge that I mentioned of going from web development to building on mobile.
Good. Yeah. So the feels like the main problem in mobile right now is figuring out the platform specific stuff and maintaining two different versions of an application at any steps. Does React Native help with that portion, or do you still have two applications? So this is coming from myself directly. Like it's not a general interview question. Do I need to run two code bases? Because I've been experimenting with something called Hotwire Native, which is a bridge between Rails, Stimulus, JavaScript, and mobile. Mostly because I am a Rails developer, and to do things like one screen on mobile, it's fine to use that stuff. But I need to maintain three different applications there. One is the Rails app, one is the iOS app, and one is the Android app. They're not full clones, like you don't need all code for all three in all three folders, but there's a lot. How much code is shared between the various platforms in React Native?
I would say, in my experience in building, probably 90 to 95% is shared. It's very high. And maybe that's just a sign of the types of things that I have built. But in what I've done so far, it's very similar because you are building in one code base. You're building one code base, you're building components that are going to be deployed to both systems or all three systems if you're doing a universal app, which includes web. So that would be iOS, Android, and web, all stemming from the same code base. And for the small differences, those are generally going to be some kind of if statement or conditional logic that says, if the platform is iOS, do this special little thing over here. If the platform is Android, do this other special little thing over here, or maybe web if you're doing all three. A example of this is I was working on a project that had a map view in it. So you're
Mhm.
scrolling through a listing and you see a geographical view of the map. And if you're on iOS, that is going to be displayed like a Apple Maps interactive little thing or Google Maps on Android. And then web has its own thing and it can't really display that natively. So you just have an if condition that's like, if you're iOS, do this. If you're Android, do that. If you're web, display this other thing. But it's
Mhm.
very, very simple and it's not bulky. So it doesn't really feel like you're maintaining two different things like that. So for the most part, it's pretty straightforward, the same code on both platforms. The other caveat to that is you will have to set up some config and metadata around different platforms. So we might get into this more in a little bit, but when you're dealing with mobile applications specifically, there's a number of extra things that you have to consider. One of those being device permissions and privacy declarations. So, do you need access to the person's contacts or do you need access to their location? Because you're dealing with a physical device and you have these different properties that you can access that you wouldn't typically have in a web setting. And when you're putting an application on the store, the Android store and the Apple store or the iOS store have different requirements on how you're supposed to declare those things in the config portion of your code. And generally speaking, you'll have to have two different blocks, maybe in a JSON file of here's my Android section and it uses these permissions, and here's my iOS section and it uses these other permissions. But again, in the grand scheme of the whole app, it's pretty minor.
Good. So I think so. Let's go down the route, the road of myself getting started, which is something I've been trying to do, etc. There seems to be at least a few pathways to get a React Native application started. There is one official. I don't want to say if it's official because they might all be official. I don't know. Like there is a React Native create app script that will give you an application, and then you can eject the application so it gives you the libraries locally so you can edit that. Or there's Expo, and there seems to be at least another build chain that might be involved. First of all, what's the recommended way to get started in your opinion? Like, is Expo giving you enough extra functionality that is worth getting into, or should someone starting out just do the base tutorial and go from there?
I would always recommend going the Expo route.
Mhm.
So when you're reading the React documentation on their website, they even recommend using Expo. And for the projects that I have used Expo myself. So I have personally seen the ease of use and developer experience that it brings to the table. And I don't have any affiliation with Expo, but I am a big fan of their product. They have a very powerful CLI that you can use that is a
Mhm.
bit more powerful than that Create React Native CLI that you mentioned, and it will bootstrap your project and get it running with so much ease. You tell it, I want to create a new React project. It's going to ask you a few questions about, do you need this permission or that permission, what do you want to name it, those types of hello world type of questions. And then it will build your project files out for you, give you a hello world type of app, and then it also spins it up and starts running it for you. And it's actually really cool. In your terminal window, it will give
Mhm.
you a QR code. And if you scan that QR code on your phone, you'll
Nice.
get a live preview of the app that's running, that you have running on your machine on your phone. And it brings a lot of different features to the table. But as you start making modifications to your app and you start writing your code, when you save your file, you'll get an instant response on your device if you scan that QR code that will give you a live updating preview of what your app is looking like as you build it. And then on the other side of the developer experience, they have a lot of tools that make building and distributing your app much easier than it would be if you were trying to do it all yourself. And then they also throw in some extra libraries. They have an open source project that they maintain where they give you additional native modules or functional pieces of functionality that you don't get out of the box with React Native, but they have provided those as well. So it's really very complementary to React Native and works with it very well. And one thing that I didn't mention is their documentation. They have some of the best developer documentation that I've seen, and they have a really, really good getting started section that will take you by the hand and walk you through getting started with a React app. So, going back to your question a second ago, I would definitely recommend going the Expo route, especially if it's your first time.
Well, yeah, that's it feels like I'm coming from another angle, coming from the Rails side. I share much of your same feelings. Like, use any of the tools you have available. Maybe at the first it can be a little bit more confusing because you have more things to learn. There's one more command line. There's one more, but then when you just get started, you're already on the right path, as opposed to having just learned the language or framework itself, but you haven't actually learned the important part. Like, getting a React view together takes 10 minutes. The problem is compiling it to something that you can observe and whatnot, which leads me into the following question. I'll go out there and ask this: TypeScript or no TypeScript?
Oh boy, you hit me with the divisive one. I like it. I am I have a love-hate relationship with TypeScript. I will probably always use TypeScript though. It causes me so many headaches, but I do think it's the way to go given all of the benefits that you get with it. I think that outweighs the pain that it might cause you in the process. So I'm team TypeScript, I think here. And it seems like these days most projects by default give you TypeScript anyways. So you don't really have to make a choice if you're not intentionally trying to make a choice the other
Mhm.
direction. They kind of just like, all right, you're using TypeScript. Here you go.
Yeah, the to me as a complete beginner, TypeScript looks like it so let me split this discussion. When I'm doing something in Node or something server side, to me it feels like TypeScript is making my work more complex. Well, all I'm trying to do is just build a simple node process that is usually one WebSocket and some API on the other side, or two WebSockets where it's actually a translation layer or something like that. Having to do it in TypeScript requires me to figure out the build chain, etc. But since React Native needs to be built anyways, because otherwise it doesn't work. I mean, the files are not ready to be consumed by the platform. It might very well be that it's probably a better use. What advantages does TypeScript actually provide as a developer if you were to pick one or two?
If I had to pick one, I would probably say the code completion aspect, especially if you're using an IDE like Visual Studio Code, when you're coding and you can hit the period to see what properties does this object have, then it just displays them right there because it's all typed out. And
Mm,
I don't have to commit the entire shape of that object to memory necessarily. And it
mm.
makes that experience much better.
Yeah, that's something that's very often understated, but it's really I when back when Ruby got the named parameters and functions, way before we had AI, Copilot, whatever, just normal autocomplete by there was a couple projects doing that. Just starting using named parameters, which are not typed. So Ruby used to only have a positional parameter. So the first one will go into the first variable name. Second will be into the second. No way to do something more complicated. Since at least name parameters were introduced, I feel like the development experience has gotten much better. So I think that typed will be even better. Like if it actually prevented me from sending in an integer when you're looking for a string and whatnot, or at least told give you hints, that's probably I feel like I need to try again. I probably just need to try it again. It's you need to embrace the suck a little, which
This
is a
is
good
true.
segue. Yeah, it's which is a good segue into this. How long do you think it takes someone who has, let's say, decent JavaScript development skills, right? That's not starting from zero. Is never a discussion here. Go learn. Actually, go buy yourself a Kernighan and Ritchie C language book. Go through that, and then come back and we'll talk. But people who have development skills, how long does it take you to be productive in React Native, in your opinion?
Ooh, that's a good question. To be productive, I would just want to say a few days, maybe couple days.
Oh
I think
wow.
it's going to take more than a couple hours, especially if it's something that you're not completely used to, but it doesn't take long to get into a groove and get going with it. And I think that with all of the documentation and tools that we have at our disposal now, that becomes much easier. And even tools like these different AI models that you can ask any question you want of. Most of them, especially the newer ones, are pretty good at giving you good explanations as to why is this thing this way? Could you like dumb it down for me if I need to? Things like that. So, if you're coming from a web kind of a background, then I don't think it takes that long. On the other hand, the you didn't quite ask this, but I'm going to dive into it a little bit. The
Mm,
how long does it take to really get an app out there? That can take a while. So I think there is a little bit of a difference between being productive in a system and finishing a product in a system. There is quite a bit of a longer tail on actually building out a full app and finishing it. So don't take what I'm saying about being productive and think, oh, that means I'm going to be able to jump in here and crank out an app really fast. It's probably going to take longer than you expect it to actually get the app together. But as
mm,
far as getting into the code and feeling like you're making meaningful changes and not banging your head against a wall with it, it doesn't really take that long, in my opinion. I could be wrong, but I think that with the systems that we have now,
mm.
it's not too bad.
Nice. So there's well, that gives me even more interest into the platform because it's taken me a while to figure out a few things. And going back to the tooling and libraries, etc. Would you recommend people getting into one of the state management libraries? Like I've used one called I think Zoo Stand because it was recommended as the smallest one, and I've used Recoil way back and never touched Redux because I've been I tried going through the tutorial in Redux and it felt like I was getting a second engineering degree, but it was nuclear engineering this time. So I'm just said, you know what, I'm not touching that. So, would you recommend what libraries should people look into incorporating immediately to get started faster?
I definitely agree with your opinion on Redux. It can be wildly complicated sometimes if you're especially if you're not used to it. So that's just going to send you off on a tangent that you probably don't want
And
to go
sorry to
on.
interject. The problem is that if you read 5 tutorials on Redux, they are all completely different.
That's
Like
true.
they
That is
make you
true.
do a completely different thing, and you get out of it saying, "This is not this is not possible." Like if you go through a tutorial in Rails to make a simple controller, and you see 5 of them, 80% is going to be the same. Redux, it looks like 5 libraries.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, cuz Rails is very opinionated and this is the way that you do the thing. You do it exactly this way. But with Redux and oftentimes with React, it can just be the wild west of here's some tools in the toolbox. You can use them any number of different ways that you want to, and that can create a confusing situation sometimes. And yeah, when if you're watching 5 different Redux tutorials and they all approach it 5 different ways, you might be even more confused at the end than you were when you started. So maybe don't pick that one at first. It is good for enterprise level applications, but if you're just doing this on your own or just getting into it, I do think Zustand is a good place to start. That's what I'm using in one of the apps that I've built. And then the other one actually didn't really have any state management in it. So I would say first evaluate whether or not you need state management. Maybe you don't. If you do need state management, Zustand is a good place to start, though, because it is a bit simpler to use and easier to wrap your head around and understand.
Yeah, Zustan sounded like the concept of state is more centralized. There's one place where you go get your data from, you get your data back, and that's where we're start. But again, there's many other. So let's play with this scenario before I ask you about what you've been building. I finally got something going. It's a simple app. It's just fetches some data from the backend, shows it. It's a news application I want to do for my local sports group. It's done. How do I get it to the App Store? Is there any difference between putting a native app on the App Store and React Native? Is there any tool that will help getting the app released? How does it work? Does Expo do that?
That is a great question. And this topic is near and dear to my heart because I will preface this with getting your app into the App Store is probably the most difficult part of app development. As people who love technology, we can learn different frameworks. We can learn different languages. We can learn how to build in a different system. We can follow the tutorials. We can use the CLI. These things should not be foreign to us. But the App Store process is just a lengthy, arduous, sometimes bureaucratic process of getting your app in. There are tools that Expo offers that makes it easier. So they have this tool called Expo Application Services, and it's another CLI, and that will build and package your app for you. And it will also submit that binary or artifact to the App Store for you and get that kicked off. But what you still need to do is you need to get a bunch of screenshots of your application. Those screenshots have to be the right dimensions and the right size for the different platforms that you're releasing to. You have to write up a good description that's going to be compelling. You have to get all of your permissions correct, all of your privacy declarations correct. You have to get a privacy policy. Every app in the App Store has to have a privacy policy, so you need one of those and you need to be able to link to it. You have to have a support email or a URL or something that you can point people to. And it's just all of this process that you have to go through. And when it comes to Apple, there's a review process where an Apple reviewer has to go through it and they have to approve it. And then there's also the cost of maintaining an Apple developer account, which is a little bit on the expensive side sometimes. And then on the Google side of things, there's also a review process that it has to go through. And one of the things that caught me off guard the most was on the Google side,
Mhm.
if you are an individual developer, so you're not a company, you're not an LLC, you're just, I'm developer Ryan Carroll, me. It's just me. I'm not a company. If I am pushing an app to the Google Play Store as myself, not a company, then there is this 2-week beta testing process where I have to get, I think it's something like 12 other people who are using Android to install my app and leave it on their phone for a continuous 2-week period of time before the Google reviewer will look at it. So there's just this
Mm.
long review process that takes extra time that I wasn't anticipating when I did this for the first time. So it was just this little bit of a setback that I wasn't quite ready for in the timeline. Now that I'm expecting it and I know what to do, it's not so bad, but it is just a lot of extra effort that maybe most developers may not be anticipating when it comes to these things.
Yeah, I've had pretty much the same experience. Does the review process take longer, or are you exposed to more risk of getting rejected when you're doing React Native than a native app, or doesn't really not matter? Like, is this some, are the problems sounds like they're the same?
I believe they're the same. I have worked on native apps, but I haven't actually pushed any of them to the App Store, so I have limited comparison here. But from what I've seen, I believe they would be pretty much the same challenges either way you go.
Hmm. Yeah, the review process plus sometimes it's just arcane. Like I've never released an app myself, but as a consultant, I've been through projects supporting someone who's doing it, and I've seen perfectly normal applications get rejected because of something that was I've seen an app get rejected because of a comment posted by someone who was visible on the application. That had nothing to do with the app itself. The app itself was providing access to an external uh, set of comments, reviews and whatnot. Was one review where was using a word that wasn't even really meant in that context. It was some kind of a slur, but it wasn't. It was literally just words that you can maybe not an English speaking person trying to write in English, whatever. And that got the app rejected, and it took the team almost 3 months because that was like an offense. It was not just a technical review failure. It was an actual policy offense, and it took them like 3 months. They had to remove the comments just to make sure. So I don't even know how Amazon does it when they have all those reviews, and they probably do a lot of more moderation. So it's well, I think the last question and the most important is, what have you built with React Native?
I've got a couple projects that I have put out not too long ago that I'm excited about. The first one is more of just a fun kind of project, and it's a small little travel bingo game that I have. And the inspiration for this project is when I was growing up and we would go on road trips with the family. We would all load into the car, and my parents had these cardboard little bingo boards that we would play. And on the bingo board would be different landmarks. So maybe a horse or a cow or a billboard or a gas station or what have you. And we would always pass out these things and we would play bingo. And it was a ton of fun and I really enjoyed it. And over time, I got to thinking this could be the perfect mobile game. You could put in a ton of different bingo squares and you can randomize them. You could create different flavors of boards if you're driving in the city or outside of the city or what have you. And there were a couple kind of apps on the App Store that were similar to it, but nothing that worked quite how I wanted it to, and nothing that was on both Android and iOS. Because if you're going to play bingo with a bunch of people, you want to all be using the same system so that it's a fair game. And I saw React Native and I was like, ooh, I could use this. It doesn't matter who has Android, it doesn't matter who has iOS. We can all be playing the same thing. So that was a project that I put together last year. It's called Travel Bingo, Road Trip Bingo. And it's that one's pretty near and dear to my heart just because of the sentimental reason of it. And it's also very rewarding. I think I mentioned this in the past episode when we were talking about the decibel meter, but when you actually build something and put it together and get to use it yourself, just the reward and fulfillment that you get from that is very special. And when I got the bingo game together and played it with a group of friends and family on a trip, it was really fun and very rewarding. So that's
Yeah.
one of them.
Yeah.
The other one that is more recent, and this one is also special to me in a different way. This one is called Circles Relationships, and it's a fairly simple application, but I think the system that it provides is powerful. So the idea around this one is you have we all have different these people that we care about that we want to keep in touch with. So I have a list of people of these are the people that I really care about in my life and I want to make sure I stay in contact with them. And sometimes particularly with friends that don't live in the same area where you are, they're not local so you can't really physically see them as much. There's been times where I've had this realization of, oh, it's been a month or two and I haven't texted or called so and so because you're always kind of maintaining this mental list of people that you're keeping touch with and reaching out to. And what this app does is you import your contacts into the app and you select, like, here's the people that I want to keep in touch with. And you will choose a frequency for how often you want to reach out to them, whether it's daily or weekly or monthly or whatever that cadence is. And then on a per person basis, it will send you a push notification that just gently reminds you it's time to reach out to so and so. It's been a week since you talked to them. You want to talk to them every week. Now it's time to reach out to them. And then there's also a journaling component to it as well, where the intention is after you reach out to them and make that connection, whether that's texting or calling or you hang out in person, then you journal about your interaction with them, things that you talked about, what you did. That way, as you're carrying that relationship forward, you have a record of here are all of the things that we talked about before, and here's what we want to talk about next time to keep that reminder. So it really is a companion for how do you enrich your relationships and keep them going forward. And the idea or the name of circles is each relationship is a circle that you want to keep closed, right? You don't want that circle to be broken and have a gap in it, but you always want to keep that loop going. So that is a very recent release, but I am very excited for it, mainly because I'm just excited to use it myself. Um, so that one I'm pretty excited for. So those are the two that I've got at the moment.
Nice. Well, are they both on app stores or something people can download and have fun with?
Yes, so Travel Bingo. is
Mhm.
on both. It's on iOS and Android. And then Circles Relationships is only on iOS at the moment, but I will be releasing it to Android soon, hopefully.
Well, then looking forward to that. I'll go download them right after the recording. I'm curious. Cool. So, well, thank you, Ryan, for joining us today. It was a pleasure. Thank you for all the information on React Native. It's the kind of information we need to have more of on the podcast, like about what people should do to get started, the practical journey, and all the other stuff. And it's just fantastic. So, thank you so much. It was very, 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 very good.
Thank you again for having me.
And well, but looking forward to for the next time. Will be maybe you can do a part three sometimes in the future. For now, thanks again.
Thank you.
Rest of the people, I'll see you next week. Goodbye.